Black woman adopts a boy nobody wants. 25 years later, he does this behind her back. It was a breezy Saturday afternoon at the edge of Maplewood Park when she first saw him. Volunteers had gathered for a local foster care picnic, handing out sandwiches, painting faces, blowing bubbles that floated like fragile hopes. But there, beneath a crooked oak tree, sat one boy who didn't join the laughter. His hoodie was 2 sizes too big, and his sneakers had duct tape across the sides. He wasn't playing, wasn't smiling, just quietly drawing circles in the dirt with a twig, like he was erasing himself from the world. Vanessa had come to help serve lemonade, not change her life. But when she looked at him, something shifted. He wasn't just alone, he was invisible, forgotten. His name was Jalen. 10 years old, too small for his age, and labeled too much by every family that met him. They said he had anger issues, that he barely spoke, that he couldn't sit still, but Vanessa didn't see a problem. She saw a storm trying to survive in silence. She sat next to him and offered a cookie. He didn't take it, but he looked up. And for the first time, someone looked back. Really looked. She came back the next weekend. And the one after that. They didn't talk much. He just nodded now and then, stared at her hands like he was trying to decide if they were safe. The foster care staff warned her. "He's been through a lot," they said. "He'll push you away." Vanessa only smiled. "So did I," she replied. She knew broken didn't mean unworthy. It just meant waiting for the right glue. And maybe, just maybe, she could be that glue. 3 months later, she signed the papers. The woman who had no children, no husband, and a house with 1 extra bedroom suddenly had a son. Jalen moved in on a rainy Wednesday. He brought only one backpack and a pillow shaped like a race car. The ride home was quiet, but every red light felt like a lifetime of hope finally catching up. At the door, he hesitated. She knelt beside him, took his hand gently, and said, "This is your home now. Forever. No takebacks." He didn't speak, but he stepped in. The first few months weren't easy. He screamed at night, refused hugs, threw shoes across the hallway, and hid under the table when the doorbell rang. But Vanessa never flinched. She made him pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, left sticky notes with jokes in his lunchbox, and sat outside his door every night until he finally whispered, "Good night, Mom," from under the blanket. She cried, not because he said it, but because he meant it. Years passed, slowly and beautifully. Jalen learned to ride a bike, read full books, cried less, laughed more. He painted a picture of her once. Big curly hair, brown eyes, a heart, drawn where her chest would be. "That's where you keep the magic," he told her. She hung it on the fridge and never took it down. He didn't become perfect, but he became whole. And Vanessa, in all her quiet strength, gave him the one thing he never thought he'd have, a reason to believe he was enough. She hadn't meant to be there that day. Vanessa usually skipped community events, especially the ones with balloons and crowded tables, the kind that reminded her of everything she didn't have. But a neighbor had begged her to volunteer. Just for an hour, they said. So she showed up, wearing a denim jacket 2 sizes too big and sunglasses she didn't really need. She stood by the lemonade stand, offering plastic cups to strangers, when a flicker of movement under the big oak tree caught her eye. At first, she thought he was part of a shadow. A small figure tucked against the roots, hood up, face hidden, legs drawn in like he was trying to disappear. The other children ran through the grass with painted faces and sticky fingers, but this boy sat alone, still as stone. Something about his stillness pulled her, like grief disguised as quiet. She didn't know why, but her feet moved before her thoughts could stop them. She crossed the grass and crouched beside him, letting her hands rest loosely on her knees. "Hey there," she said softly, unsure what to expect. The boy didn't speak, didn't flinch, but slowly he turned his face toward her. Hazel eyes met hers, not with fear but something deeper. Caution. He looked maybe 9 or 10, with soft freckles and skin the color of burnt sugar. A cut ran across his knuckle, dried blood flaking off. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "You don't have to sit here." But she didn't move. She smiled. "Maybe I want to." His name was Jalen. That was all he gave her. No last name, no birthday, no stories. Just Jalen. He didn't smile, didn't ask questions, but he didn't tell her to leave either. And in that strange little corner of the park, beneath the oak tree and away from the bouncing castles and cheap music, they sat in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was almost peaceful, like two secrets had found each other. The outreach coordinator came by and raised a brow. "He doesn't usually talk to people," she whispered, as if it were a warning. "Been in the system since he was 3. Bit of a wild card." Vanessa didn't reply. She was too busy watching the way Jalen's fingers picked at the grass, arranging the blades into rows. There was order in his chaos. Intention. She didn't see a wild card. She saw a boy trying to organize a world that never made sense to him. The papers took 6 months. 6 long, uncertain, whispered months filled with visits, background checks, interviews, and more forms than she ever imagined. Vanessa almost gave up twice, once after the 3rd home inspection, and again when Jalen had a meltdown during a supervised visit and kicked over a chair. But each time she remembered the way he looked at her, like he was testing if she'd stay, and each time she came back. On a crisp Thursday morning, Jalen walked out of the group home with a small duffel bag and no goodbye. Vanessa knelt. In front of him, zipped up his coat, and said, "Ready when you are." He didn't answer, but he nodded. That was enough. The first few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Jalen didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't eat unless reminded, didn't play with the toys she had carefully picked out. His room stayed clean, untouched, like he was afraid to claim it. Sometimes Vanessa would hear him crying in the middle of the night, muffled into his pillow. She never pushed. Instead, she'd sit outside his door, humming softly until his breathing calmed. During the day, he'd follow her like a shadow, never close enough to touch, but always watching, always there. He didn't like hugs, didn't like sudden sounds, hated the vacuum, flinched when the doorbell rang. Once when she reached for a dish, he ducked like he expected to be hit. That moment nearly broke her. Vanessa didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She simply changed. She started vacuuming when he was out of the house. She wore softer shoes. She swapped the metal wind chimes for fabric ones. Slowly, day by day, she adjusted her world to make it safer for his. At school, things weren't easier. The other kids didn't understand him. Some laughed, some whispered. One boy called him foster freak and threw a juice box at his backpack. Vanessa found out later when Jalen came home with grape stains on his math homework. She wanted to storm into the principal's office and scream. Instead, she folded the paper neatly, kissed the top of his head, and said, "People are loud when they're scared of something they don't understand. But I understand you. And that's louder." The first time he laughed, really laughed, was over spilled cereal. Vanessa had dropped a box of Cheerios all over the kitchen floor and slipped on them. She landed with a thud and a yelp. Jalen froze for a second. Then he covered his mouth, eyes wide, and giggled. It started small, then grew into a full-blown belly laugh. Vanessa just lay there, staring up at the ceiling, laughing with him. It wasn't just about the cereal. It was a crack in the wall. Fall came quickly that year. The leaves turned gold, and rust, and the air smelled of cinnamon and wet sidewalks. Jalen started sitting closer to Vanessa on the couch. He didn't say much, but sometimes he'd rest his head on her shoulder during cartoons. She never moved, never commented, just let him stay as long as he wanted. One Saturday, he asked if they could carve pumpkins together. Vanessa said yes before he even finished the sentence. That afternoon, They spent hours scooping seeds and drawing silly faces. When Jalen held up his lopsided jack-o'-lantern, Vanessa told him it was the best one she'd ever seen. And he smiled. Really smiled. He started leaving little drawings on the fridge. Stick figures holding hands, a house with 2 windows, a woman with curly hair and a boy with a red crayon heart between them. Vanessa kept everyone, taping them in a line that stretched across the kitchen wall. One night, after a thunderstorm sent Jalen trembling into her room, she tucked him into bed beside her. As she stroked his hair, he whispered, "You're not gonna leave, right?" Vanessa felt her heart shatter and stitch itself back together all at once. She kissed his forehead and said, "Not in a million lifetimes, baby." Their routines became rituals. Saturday morning pancakes, always shaped like animals. Sunday afternoons in the park, feeding ducks and pretending sticks were magic wands. On school days, she left notes in his lunchbox. Just little things. "You've got this," or "You're stronger than you think." And when he brought home a math test with a gold star, he waited until she was tucking him in to show it. "I saved it for now," he whispered, "so I could see your face." Vanessa couldn't help it. She cried right there on his blanket, tears of pride and awe. Jalen started opening up in tiny, careful ways. He told her about his favorite superhero, his dreams of flying, his fear of deep water. One evening, while folding laundry, he asked her what her favorite color was. When she said sea green, he nodded seriously and the next day handed her a bracelet made of sea green beads. "It's protection," he explained, "so you don't forget I love you." She wore it every day. And from then on, Jalen began calling her Mom. One winter morning, after a night of heavy snow, they built a snowman in the front yard. Vanessa wrapped an old scarf around its neck, and Jalen gave it button eyes. As they stood back, admiring their creation, Jalen reached for her hand, without fear, without flinching, and said, "I think we're the best team." Vanessa looked down at him, cheeks red from the cold, eyes full of a peace she had never seen before, and whispered, "We always will be." The years passed quietly, almost like pages fluttering in the breeze. One by one, Jalen's drawings were replaced with report cards, sports medals, and framed photos from school dances. Vanessa's curls turned silver at the edges, and her steps grew slower, but her eyes still lit up every time he walked through the door. Their home, once filled with toys and bedtime stories, now echoed with the soft hum of the past. Jalen had grown tall, taller than her, and his voice carried a calm strength that reminded her of the little boy who once trembled in thunderstorms. He got into college on a scholarship, engineering. Vanessa still remembered the night he told her, sitting at the kitchen table with an envelope in his hand and tears in his eyes. "You made this possible," he said. "You made me possible." She cried for hours that night, not out of sadness, but because the boy nobody wanted had become a man everyone could admire. She helped him pack, folding his clothes with shaking hands and slipping a note into his suitcase like she used to with his lunchbox. "You've still got this," it said. "Always." The day he left, she stood on the porch, waving until the car disappeared around the bend. The house felt impossibly quiet afterward. She wandered room to room, pausing at the bookshelf they built together, the worn-out couch they once spilled popcorn on, the bedroom door still covered in stickers from years ago. Every corner whispered his name. Every silence was filled with memories. Vanessa kept his room exactly the same, just in case he came home needing his favorite blanket or the comfort of his old ceiling stars. He called often, every Sunday. Sometimes just to hear her voice, sometimes to tell her about his classes, a new friend, or the girl he liked who studied marine biology. Vanessa listened, always smiling through misty eyes, always reminding him to sleep enough and eat real meals. "Don't microwave everything," she'd tease. "I raised you better." And he'd laugh, a deep, warm sound that still had traces of the little boy inside. "I'm doing okay, Mom," he always ended with, "because of you." Vanessa aged slowly but steadily. Her knees ached. Her garden grew wild, but her heart stayed full. Every photo of Jalen framed on her wall, every postcard he sent, every "I love you" written in messy handwriting, she kept it all. Her life had never been about riches or recognition. It had been about love. And even though the boy she'd once rocked to sleep now lived hundreds of miles away, she never felt alone. Because some bonds don't fade with time, they deepen. And her love for Jalen had become the kind that echoes across years, undiminished. It began with small things, whispers in phone calls, pauses in his voice, subtle hesitations that didn't go unnoticed. Vanessa had always been sharp, especially when it came to Jalen. He visited less, his calls a little shorter, but when they came, his words were sweeter, more intentional. "You're everything to me, Mom," he'd say. And she'd smile, gently, brushing a tear from her cheek, unaware that behind those words was a secret slowly taking shape in the quiet corners of his heart. Jalen had spent the last 2 years of college working nights at a local tech firm. He didn't tell Vanessa much, just that he was staying busy. But what she didn't know was that every paycheck, every overtime hour, and every bonus he earned was saved in a separate account. He wasn't spending on himself, not on trips or gadgets. He was planning something big, something she would never expect. A way to say thank you in a language deeper than words, a language made of sacrifice, of thought, of heart. He remembered the way she always put him first. How she skipped dinners to buy him school supplies. How she worked weekends just to keep the lights on and his world steady. How she never complained, never asked for anything in return. Jalen knew he could never repay her love, but he wanted to honor it. So he found a real estate agent, quietly, carefully. And when the perfect house came on the market, a little blue bungalow with white shutters and a porch swing just like she always dreamed of, he didn't hesitate. He signed the papers, in full, in her name. The agent cried when he explained the story. "She adopted me when no one else would," Jalen said. "I want to give her something she never had, a home that's truly hers." He spent months furnishing it, room by room. With curtains like the ones she sewed in their old kitchen, a bookshelf filled with every story she once read to him, and a garden patch in the back with rows marked for her favorite flowers. Everything had her fingerprints, even though she hadn't seen it yet. It wasn't just a house, it was a tribute, a thank you, a promise fulfilled. And finally, on a spring morning, he told her they were going on a short trip. "Just a weekend," he said with that boyish grin that always made her suspicious. Vanessa, now moving a bit slower, still trusted him fully. She packed a light bag, asked no questions, and as they pulled into the driveway of that little blue house with the white shutters, she blinked at it like it was a dream. "Whose house is this?" she asked softly. Jalen didn't answer right away. He just handed her a key with a tiny heart engraved on the tag. "It's yours, Mom," he whispered. "Everything I am started with you." Vanessa stood frozen on the front walkway, the key trembling between her fingers. The house in front of her was the kind she used to sketch on the corners of grocery lists. Blue siding, white trim, a porch swing swaying gently in the breeze, her breath caught in her chest. "Mine," she repeated, barely above a whisper. Jalen didn't speak. He just nodded, his eyes glistening. She looked back at the house, then at him, as if trying to confirm she hadn't stepped into a dream. She climbed the steps slowly, her hand grazing the rail, her knees weak with disbelief. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, the scent of lavender and polished wood greeted her like an old friend. Every wall was painted in calm pastels, every corner filled with warmth. Her eyes scanned the living room, pillows with embroidered flowers, a photo of her and Jalen on the mantel, the same lamp she once sold years ago now sitting beside a new, cozy armchair. "How did you—" she murmured, her voice cracking. Jalen guided her through each room. "This is your reading nook," he said, pointing to a sunlit corner with a soft chair and shelves of books. "And here's your garden," he added, leading her through the back door to rows of marigolds, lilies, and herbs, just like the ones she talked about planting when he was little. Vanessa reached out, touching the petals like they might vanish if she blinked. Her hands trembled, not from age but from awe. She turned to him, her eyes wide with emotion. "You remembered all of it?" He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I remembered everything, every sacrifice, every bedtime story, every moment you believed in me when no one else did." His voice cracked and he looked away for a second. "This house, it's the least I could do." Vanessa couldn't speak. She just pulled him into a hug, fierce and silent. They stood, there, mother and son, wrapped in the kind of gratitude that didn't need words, just hearts beating close enough to hear the truth. She cried that night, not out of sorrow, but something deeper. Joy, maybe. Fulfillment. A peace she hadn't known in years. She walked barefoot through the house, fingers trailing across counters and curtains, touching pieces of her past brought lovingly into the present. And as she stood on the porch under the fading sun, Jalen came and sat beside her, handing her a warm cup of tea. "I don't know what I did to deserve this," she whispered. He smiled softly. "You were the first person to choose me. Now it was my turn to choose you." The porch creaked gently beneath their chairs as the evening settled into a quiet hush. Crickets sang in the distance, and the breeze carried the soft scent of jasmine from the garden. Vanessa sipped her tea slowly, her hands finally still. She glanced over at Jalen, who now towered beside her in stature, but sat with the same quiet heart that once clung to her leg on his first night home. "Do you remember?" she said softly. "When we used to sit on the fire escape and dream of something like this?" Jalen chuckled under his breath, eyes scanning the sky. "Yeah," he nodded. "You'd say, 'One day you'll have a front porch, not just a metal ladder.'" I didn't believe it back then. Vanessa smiled, her gaze misting over. "But I did," she whispered. "I always did." The stars blinked above them, and in that stillness, everything felt whole. There was no more running, no more scraping by. Just a mother and her son, built not by blood but by choice, by time, by love that refused to quit. Jalen leaned back, his arm resting behind her on the swing. "You know," he said, voice thoughtful, "every step I took, every job I worked, every decision I made, it was always to come back to you, to make sure you never had to struggle again." Vanessa turned toward him, her smile trembling. "And I never asked for anything," she said, "just for you to live, to find joy, to be okay." He met her eyes, and for a moment, the years between them vanished. The swing rocked slowly as night deepened, the moon casting soft silver light across their faces. Vanessa's eyes closed, her heart full for the first time in decades. Jalen sat beside her, not saying a word, just listening to the quiet, the peace, the love that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. And in that moment, on that porch, in the house built on memories and miracles, they knew. They had made it. Together. Full circle. From forgotten strangers to forever family, and as the wind whispered through the trees, their laughter drifted into the night. Two souls who once had nothing, now had everything that mattered. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?